Welcome to State of the State. I'm John Carlevale, hosting this State of the State program. And we have the good fortune this evening to have Dick August joining us to give us a little retrospective on the 2022 election that we all experienced. And I might add that Richard August was supposed to participate in our last program, but at the last minute he had an engagement that he could not miss. And so we have him here now as a guest on State of the State.
I think this is maybe the second time. The very first time I was a guest and interviewed by a former host, Ian.
Yes.
And then one thing led to another. How many years has it been, John?
It's about 12.
About 12 years. Seems hard to believe that it's been 12 years, but it's been a lot of fun. Enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on this side of the table.
You know, Dick, I think we're going to talk about some things tonight in relationship to the 2020 election that I had mentioned earlier before we started, that they're probably going to resonate with a sizable portion of the population, but my hunch is that another portion of the population might be uncomfortable with what you're about to say. Well,
I think that's true. As you know, I sometimes submit letters to the editor and so forth to various newspapers, and a lot of the feedback comes back, you know, from people on the left. A lot of people think that I'm a fairly right-wing conservative type guy, but I call myself a constitutionalist. And I'm open to all the arguments, and I want to have opinions, but I like them to be based on fact, not on emotions and not on feelings. So maybe that's when we get into trouble, because you and I both know there seems to be a reluctance building to have folks from the liberal side of the political spectrum come on this program. And I'm not sure why that is, because certainly you and I both agree that it is not our job to get into a debate with our guests and not embarrass them in any way.
Yes.
Let them express their feelings. And we've had some folks from the Democrat side, Julie Casimiro, my state rep. We've had the rep from Jamestown, whose name escapes me for a moment, who ran for Secretary of State. No, Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah. So we've had Seth Magaziner came on early in the campaign.
Yes, he did.
So much to their credit. There are others that simply don't want to. So are there?
And you know, Dick, of course, we agree on many things. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on many things. And I think the way you described yourself as a person who wants to hear what other people are thinking and what's your arguments for your side, that makes for better government, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And
but we don't seem to be getting much of that these days.
I think both sides of the political spectrum are kind of digging in their heels, and on the left and on the right, the bedrock of the two major political parties are really in a hard position, and the area of compromise is just not there. So you get deadlock.
Yes.
And frankly, I think when the Constitution was written, the founders anticipated this friction, and deadlock is not a bad thing. Everybody says, well, why can't we all just get along? Well, then we don't need a two-party government if we all just agreed on everything, right?
Absolutely.
But there has to be compromise, but less and less do we see each side willing to compromise and give up something to get something, and maybe everybody isn't terribly happy with the outcome, but at least we're moving forward, and the greater good is addressed, I think.
I agree. Mm-hmm. But you're not surprised at that?
No.
Well, Dick, I know that you wanted to talk about a few of the contests that were part of this election, and so perhaps we should, begin with that. If I remember correctly, you interviewed a member who was seeking election to the Attorney General's office, and I know that you wanted to talk about that particular race.
Yeah, I think there's three races that I think we should focus on, John. The one you're referring to is Jim Lathrop, who ran for General Treasurer.
General Treasurer, yes.
Jim, former Mayor Diosa, now Treasurer-elect Diosa, did not, or his campaign chose not to respond to our invitation. So we did have Mr. Lathrop on twice. The second one is the Chaz Calenda versus AG Peter Nerona. And again, Peter Nerona's campaign flat out refused to come on if I was going to be the moderator. So we had Mr. Calenda on twice. And the third one we should talk about is the Alan Fung, Seth Magaziner. And we did have Seth come on, but frankly, Alan Fung did promise me personally that he would come on this program. Again, he didn't show, but we did talk to Seth. I think the Lathrop-Diosa race was instructive from this point of view. The General Treasurer's office is a very technical office. But there isn't really a requirement that the person who sits in that office has to have a financial background. And you and I both know that we've had other people. When I first moved here to the state, the gentleman who was in the office was a pharmacist by training.
Yes.
So we look at the Attorney General's office, and we certainly expect that person to be a lawyer, a member of the bar. But Jim Lathrop is a CPA by training. He has a master's degree in public administration. He was the municipal finance director in North Kingstown and held several similar positions. Very, very well versed in finance. And I watched the debate between he and Mr. Diosa on Channel 12. That, just to see what would have happened if they were here.
Sure.
What struck me, John, was that Jim Lathrop was very straightforward, and he's clearly not a politician. And at one point, he even said, in response to a question, that he thought Providence, the city of Providence, was facing bankruptcy because of their sorely underfunded pension liability. And both the host, Tim White, and Ted Nisi, were shocked. And they said, do you mean you think they should, or are you saying they will? And Jim Lathrop looked at him and said, both. Now, curiously, during the debate, when the camera was on or the question was directed to Mr. Lathrop, Mr. Diosa had this very strange smile on his face and seemed to be rubbing his hands, and he didn't know quite what to do. The other striking thing, John, was that they asked about the COLAs that, for the state workers and the municipal plans. Mr. Diosa's solution was to give every state or public employee on pension what he called a stipend of $500 next year. And they said, the host said, well, are you saying that this would be an ongoing thing? He said, well, that would be like the first annual installment. We may have to do something in the future. And I think Mr. Lathrop said, well, are you saying take the money out of the pension fund? And Diosa's response is, oh, no, I'm going to go to the legislature and ask them to take it out of the general fund. How much will that cost? That was the question. $14 to $15 million. Now, here's a candidate for general treasurer who is offering a solution that involves taking money from the general fund, from the taxpayers, to subsidize the retirees on the public pension system. And this is just the same old thing, right? Well, former Mayor Diosa, as you know, is general treasurer-elect. So people seem to like that message, I guess. And if we want to talk about the second one,
well, let me comment on that. As I recall the interview that you conducted with James Lathrop, he mentioned, and Dick, you correct me if I misspeak. I'm not bashful about being corrected. But he said that some of the pensions that the state oversees are in better condition than others.
Correct.
And some of them are probably eligible or almost eligible for a COLA, but because the other ones are doing so poorly, you can't give them one. And his position was, if I recall correctly, is those cities and towns or whatever that are closer to meeting that level that was said to them that at that particular time you could have a COLA, then we ought to give them a COLA. Not everyone would be getting a COLA, but at least the pensions that have increased their net work.
Right. Percentage of funding, yes.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. He seemed to have repeated that on the debate on Channel 12, and but he was kind of challenged on that. But I don't want to get down too deep in the weeds, but sure. Certainly it seemed to me to be a constructive approach. And if there was some barrier to doing it, if you go to the General Assembly, maybe you could get the law changed so that they could issue COLAs to those funds that are adequately funded.
But what Lathrop was saying, and I'm interpreting, is that when you do that, you take the money out of the fund, right, not out of the pockets of the taxpayer.
Right, not go to the General Assembly and say take it out, out of general funds, out of the Treasury. I mean, let's face it, the state is running, again, a substantial surplus this year.
Yes, it is.
So the funds are there, and of course, when that happens, all the special interest groups are lining up, rubbing their hands and licking their chops. So who knows, maybe Mr. Diosa, General Treasurer-elect Diosa, will get his wish if it's 14 to 15 million bucks and they're sitting on $600 million surplus. But no one ever heard of a rainy day fund, I guess, right?
Well, what is that then?
Well, we could talk about the economy going forward, but, it's...
Yes, indeed. Well, Dick, let's talk about one of the other races that you wanted to talk about, and that was that of the Attorney General.
Yeah. Chaz Galinda certainly has a background. He was a prosecutor under the two previous attorneys general. He's a practicing attorney now. And his motto was, I'm going to put law above politics, whereas the incumbent and Attorney General, who is going to seek will be in another term, seems to do it the opposite. And he said he is an activist Attorney General. So people had to make a decision. And I think, to some extent, you have to look at the funding as well.
Yes,
because dollars is the mother's milk of politics, as they say. And you can only go so far. You have to have enough money to run these campaigns. So I don't know. It just seems that a person that is very well qualified but not as well funded as they need to be doesn't really stand a chance today because of the way the advertising works. And that points right into what I wanted to say about the Fung Magaziner race. John, I watched those advertisements, and I don't understand why they kept talking about everybody has a plan, but no one would say what it was.
Yes.
The first two advertisements by Mayor Fung were walking around with a hard hat and a safety vest on construction sites, which was kind of whimsical, actually, because I don't think he's ever worked on construction. I mean, if you wanted to appear that way, well, wear your regular business suit and wear the hard hat because it's required. But what was the point of that? I mean, and he's talking about the great things that happened in Cranston. Yes, they did a lot of building and so forth.
Yes, indeed.
But then the next series, what's he doing? He's walking around smiling, talking, waving at the policeman directing traffic and going to restaurants where people shout stuff out at him. And at the end, he's big smile. Oh, yeah, okay. Tell us about your energy plan. But there was nothing. Nothing, John. On the other side, the Republicans did not respond to the assault ads that were being run by the super PACs. That if Alan Fung went to Washington, he was going to vote for a national abortion ban. Never heard him say that.
Well, he said exactly the opposite.
But why didn't he come out with an advertisement to do that? Why didn't he just sit there and look right in the camera and respond to that advertisement?
I asked myself that question, and that applies to, I think, generally other candidates who were not ready to challenge what was being said about them.
Well, and the abortion issue was one. Student loans certainly was a surprise. I think caught a lot of Republicans by surprise, because the young millennials came out because they thought the Democrats were going to absolve their student debt. Yeah. And then the other thing is they tied Alan Fung to the January 6th issue and kept pointing to the fact that he said he wouldn't turn his back on Donald Trump. But why didn't he just come out and say, I totally abhor what happened on January 6th, or something to that effect, instead of not even responding? Instead, you're going to the Twin Oaks and walking around and people talking to you. I don't understand the campaign at all, John.
I'm befuddled by it as well, Dick, because I know other politicians, and I ran for public office. If someone said something about me that was totally untrue, I would just be out there with a bugle. Yep. And making a correction of that misstatement. But we didn't see any of that. At least I didn't. Maybe it was out there somewhere, but I didn't get to see it.
I know. I don't understand the strategy of some of these campaigns. I just don't. But all we can do is observe, John. But I don't think I don't think this last election, as you know, I wrote a letter to the Providence Journal saying that I think unfortunately, the GOP in Rhode Island is pretty much dead. When I moved here, we had 3 members of Congress were Republicans. Do you remember?
I do.
John Chafee was a senator. Claudine Schneider and Ron Makeley were the Congress people, representatives. And we had Claiborne Pell, the other senator. But we had 3 of the 4 congressional seats. That's it.
Yeah.
What was the last Republican governor? Was Don Carcieri.
Don Carcieri, yes.
And, I just don't, I look at this election and I just look at the way, the whole flow of this thing, and I think Republicans have not adapted to the fact that we now have a voting season and not an election day.
Dick, what do you mean by that? They haven't adapted to.
The Republicans don't understand that the focus is on an election season, getting out the ballots, getting the ballots and getting them in the mailboxes or in the drop boxes. Mm-hmm. And that's all you have to do is look at it. I mean, at the end, when the polls close, the Republicans are doing well. And then as those votes start coming in, they say, oh, well, the mail ballot came in and you lost. That happened, in the presidential election in 2020. And it sure as heck happened this time. Because I worked at a polling place, and I've worked at it many, many elections, and we had 1,169 votes cast. And yet, on election day, there was a blue box that I've never seen at an election before, where people could still come in and push the mail ballot in the box. On election day. Now, why, on election day, why do the mail ballot box, if you've applied for a mail ballot or an app, whatever you want to call it, emergency ballot, whatever you want to call it, if you've already applied for it, you mean to tell me you can't get it filed by election day? We have to leave the drop boxes open? Who goes out to the drop boxes all over the city of Providence or in Woonsocket or North Providence? And who's looking at those boxes and making sure after 8 o'clock nobody's putting ballots in it?
Good question. And it would seem to me that requires a great deal of personnel to monitor it in the fashion that it probably should be monitored.
Yep. Yep. And people talk about delays at the polling place. The polling place I was at was probably the busiest in the town, in North Kingstown, according to the Board of Canvassers. But what was really slowing it down was the referendum questions on the back.
Yes.
Voting for the candidates is a snap today. But once you turn that sheet over, a lot of people don't even realize what's on there. You have to remind them there's a ballot on the back.
And there's often You read it. You're going to say yes or no. You read it. That takes time.
Yep.
You know, maybe that should be done separately. I don't know.
Well, then you get into the problem of being able to staff up all these polling places. People don't realize it's a long, grinding day. Poll workers have to be at the polls at 6 o'clock. Excuse me, the polls close at 8. Anybody in line at 8 o'clock is entitled to vote. And you stay there. Then you have to do the dusting and cleaning. You have to pick the stuff up, break the equipment down usually. Some towns and cities, I guess, they have people that come in and do that, but a lot of them don't. So I started at 6 and I didn't get home till 9. It's a long day. When
the election is in my future, I always believe I have to do a little homework before I go in to vote. I have to find out about the people who are running for different offices and what their thinking is on this, that, and the other thing. And when it comes to the bond issues, those are millions and millions of dollars. I want to know where that money is going, how it's going to be used, and whether or not I think it's a good idea. So I guess what I'm saying is that voting today is just not at the last minute going in and registering a vote. You have to do a little preparation and homework, and I'm not so sure that that's a common practice, Dick.
Yep. It isn't, and as I say, I think a lot of this holdup in the polls this time, and at least in our town, we had a number of local issues that were referendum questions that had to be answered. And you could see people taking their time. They turn it over, and there was, I don't know, maybe the 7 or 8, because there was some questions regarding a revision to the town charter. And you have to read them very carefully.
Yes.
And that caused a backup. Well, the good news was I saw people in line were actually looking at the back, so when they got in there, they had already read the.
Sure.
But still, it takes a long time. And then people say, well, why, as you say, why not have a separate referendum? Then it costs money, sure. And you still have to get staff, you have to get equipment, and it becomes cost prohibitive. But the fact is, if people can have 3 weeks to go and apply for, more than 3 weeks, they can apply for a mail ballot, and they got 3 weeks to work on it at home.
Sure.
And in that regard, I have to tell you a little anecdotal story, John, which I'm sure will not surprise you. But I have a friend whose wife is suffering from severe dementia, and I saw him a few weeks before the election. He said, "Oh yeah, we voted by mail." And I said, yeah, and I said, because I know she was in a dementia unit in a nursing home. And I said, well, how's your wife doing? He said, well, she's okay. And I said, does she understand? Is she aware of the political, the thing? He goes, well, I knew how she would vote, so I filled it out for her. And then I said, well, did she sign it? He said, well, I pointed to it, and she put her first initials down, and then I kind of scribbled in the rest. Well, there you go, John. This is what I mean by ballot harvesting and the stuff that goes on with mail ballots. Now, we had the candidates for Secretary of State in a good debate, very good debate, yes, that Darlene D'Arezzo moderated. And the Secretary of State-elect, Mr. Amore, said, well, this is a good system because, you're there by yourself, and you don't need witnesses, you don't need a notary. Well, that's not an advantage. If 2 witnesses or a notary, which makes it basically would be a perjury, because a notary is the same as taking an oath in court.
That's
if you're swearing in front of a notary or 2 witnesses who have to print their names on there, that's a little different than just sitting in a room and filling it out yourself, or your husband or your child sitting there saying, hey, Mom, I got your ballot here. I'm going to fill it out. You just sign the bottom. And we know this happens, and it's unfortunate. But how much of it does happen, John?
We don't know.
And do we need 3 weeks?
Good question.
I mean, do they have to? The mail ballots have to be open until 8 o'clock of the election day?
And you know, my thought is on all that lead time is that any number of things can happen within that 3-week period that might change your idea about who you will vote for. Absolutely. But if you voted so far in advance, and then you learn something that to you is important and that it's of such a matter that it would cause you to change your vote, you can't.
John, I think that's a very valid point. And not only that, I've asked a couple of officials what would happen in the event your candidate unfortunately dies after you've cast your ballot.
Yeah.
There's no answer to it. They don't have an answer.
No,
because the ballot is in. You cannot say, oh, I voted for that person, they're dead, I want to change my... No. Your ballot is in. You can't go back now and say, I want another ballot to vote for someone who's not dead or incapacitated because they've had, God forbid, a stroke or something. It's a crazy situation. And for people, John, who say that voting is a sacred right, a duty, and an obligation, well, what's wrong if it takes a little bit of time to do it? If it's that sacred and that much of an obligation, is it too much to ask people? This idea that, oh, what was one of the comments they made? Oh, yeah, people don't work regular hours anymore. Well, if the polling places are open from 7 in the morning to 8 at night, don't tell me that people don't have a chance to get to the polling place. That's nonsense.
When I was in school, Dick, and probably this is the same as you because we're just about the same age, we had civics classes. Mm-hmm. And one of the many things that we learned is that that voting is our duty as a citizen. And part of our duty is to be as well informed as we possibly can be, because that vote is important. And every one of those votes is important. Mm-hmm. And if some folks are better informed than others, and my position is we all should be well informed before we vote.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the deal. And you know, a lot of people, I understand that a lot of people go in and they talk about the down ballot votes, and they look at it and they say, well, I'm voting for governor, lieutenant governor, so forth. And then I get to my local elections and I have to choose 3 for town council and 2 for school committee or whatever it is. They don't know all these people, so a lot of it is name recognition. Sure. But nevertheless, almost every publication, you can find sample ballots and everything else, and you know, kind of prepare yourself and look into the background of some of these people. What do they stand for? What do they believe in?
Yep.
So, I don't know. And one of the points I want to talk to you about, John, is when you had the interview with Darlene D'Arezzo and Mike Stenhouse, you seemed to advocate for a third party.
Well, I was just making the point that periodically throughout our history, both at the state level and the national level, there's an emergence of a third party. And it's usually in response to the fact that the current parties in power, and there are 2 of them, Democrat and Republican, are not being responsive to the population in terms of what they need or what the state itself needs. And that prompts people, and it prompted, for example, Bob Healy to start the Cool Moose Party and Ken Block to start the Moderate Party. And I listed a number of parties. And right now we have in the works, started in 2021 and still going in 2022, the Forward Party. And that party is founded by a former presidential candidate and philanthropist and a former governor of the state of New Jersey. Both those people have had considerable experience in in government and elections, and they're basically saying that the system is broken and we need to try to fix it.
Hey, but John, this is where you and I, this is one of the points we disagree on, John.
Sure.
Because I look back and you use two examples, Ken Block and the Moderate Party, and Bob Healy and the Cool Moose Party. Now let's just think for a minute. Ken Block ran as a moderate, and as a result, Lincoln Chafee was elected governor with a plurality. In fact, Bob Healy running for a lieutenant governor on the Cool Moose Party got more votes than Lincoln Chafee did for governor.
Yes, he did.
So there's an example of a third party. And in the other case, Ken Block came out and he wanted to be the Republican candidate. Why did he do that? Because he knows a third party candidate doesn't really stand a chance. But yet, when he didn't get the Republican nomination, he prevailed on Bob Healy to run as a moderate. And what happened? Gina Raimondo became governor with a plurality, not a majority. And in fact, both parties agreed that Bob Healy took 2 votes away from Alan Fung for every vote he took away from Gina Raimondo. Now, if you run the numbers, Alan Fung would have been governor.
Well,
and that's what happens when you have third parties.
In fact, if that is what happened, but at one point in time, the Republican Party was a third party.
Yep.
and it did okay, and it has been, and it's still around. And you know, the whole notion of third party movements is that it's the recognition that this government is not working the way we believe it ought to work on behalf of the people and the nation, and locally on behalf of the people and the state. And to me, that's the important thing, is the recognition that it's not working. Except,
John, the existence of third parties dilutes the Republican vote. That's my point. And
well,
John, I look at you talk about.
I understand the mechanisms, Dick, but you know, America used to tell the Russians, you only have one party. You should have 2 parties.
Wow.
Well, if 2 parties is better than 1, then maybe 3 parties is better than 2. Now, you don't get the benefit of that until another party gains in recognition and has good people, and they begin to get elected to office. And you know, you look at what takes place in England, for example.
Yeah, look at England.
You know, when the people there think that the government is not working, they make quick change because they have a number of different parties and factions, and they form coalitions, and they make it work better.
Because they have a parliamentary system. We don't have a parliamentary system.
Well,
and you can look at many, just what you're saying. We had the Prime Minister of England lasted 2 weeks.
Yes.
so is that a great system of government? I don't think it is, because we have peaceful transitions of power.
Yes, we do.
Unfortunately, right now, for whatever reason, one of my favorite commentators is Victor Davis Hanson.
Yes.
And he's talking now about we have become a series of nations. And if you think about the way the voting goes, the Northeast, when I say Northeast, I'm speaking New England. We don't have any. Well, we have Susan Collins in Maine, so technically we have one member of Congress that's a Republican. Although some would question whether she's really a Republican. But we have New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. The Northeast is blue. I call Pacifica. Hawaii, California, Oregon, Washington, throw Colorado in there, that's blue. And then the battleground states and the Republican red states are kind of in the middle. And of course, then you take your so-called Rust Belt around the Great Lakes. And so those are blue. So then when you get starting to look at what that means in terms of the Electoral College, that's where the whole rubber meets the road. And people say, well, let's do away with the Electoral College. the problem with that is that that means that Rhode Island would become just a little asterisk in the vote with four, you know, with our population. Who cares? We cast, even if we cast 200,000 ballots.
Yes.
It's nothing. I mean, California has 40 million people. It's probably the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world by itself. So, you know, the Electoral College was designed for that very purpose. The founding fathers said, well, the smaller states do not want to be dominated by the powerful states, New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania. So that's why we have it. Yeah. And it's worked very well. And Donald Trump, you know, when he won, it was a surprise because he worked the Electoral College. And you know, we talk about movements, third-party movements. There's been a movement to either do away with that system, sure, or change it. And if we change it, do we get anything that's better? Yeah, I don't know. Well, the popular vote has John, popular vote is possible, but that's not, again, that means that what candidate's going to worry about Rhode Island? When you're going to focus on where the votes are.
Where the votes are.
Where the most populous states. And that's exactly what the Electoral College was built for. Yeah. So, let's talk about the national thing. I'm going to shock you in the audience right now. Write this down, John.
Which national thing?
The next president of the United States will take office in January 2021 will be a Democrat.
That is shocking. How did you ever come up with that?
Because the candidacy of Donald John Trump is going to be the swing thing. Donald Trump, even if he is not the nominee, and I don't think his ego will allow him to do this, if he does not throw his weight behind whoever the Republican candidate is, his base is going to stay home. And if he does if he is the candidate, he is much too much a polarizing influence. And, you know, I think that he did a very good job as president in spite of his personality and the fact that people, I don't think, appreciate the tweets and all this other junk that he comes out with, but that's just the way he is.
Yes.
And that's his ego and his personality and everything else. But what he accomplished as president was pretty remarkable. But I think he was also a speed bump on the progressive march to the left, and we are seeing this today.
That's an interesting perspective, and of course, there are different kinds of supporters of Donald Trump, and some of the supporters supported Donald Trump because he did some things that they thought were needed in this country. For example, under his administration, we became energy independent. Mm-hmm. Under the current administration, we have become energy dependent. And so, you know, there's a group of supporters of Donald Trump that say, you know, oh, gee, look, we're in worse situation now than we were when Trump. And then there are some supporters of Donald Trump who support him for other reasons that may not necessarily make the people that are looking at energy independence and taxes and some of those things, that may not be important to some of the other. And I guess what you're suggesting, and don't let me put words in your mouth, is that either way, Donald Trump is going to be another problem in the next election.
Right. Yeah. One way or another. And I think, you know, some of the things, as you say, energy independence, we were actually an exporter.
Yes.
And, you know, what's really frightening, John, is that because of the policies of the Biden administration, which is being driven by I call it the climate change cult, if you will, people in Rhode Island are have to make choices whether to buy fuel oil or groceries. It's happening now, and it's going to be even worse this winter. And I really believe people have to be prepared for when the rolling blackouts start. Maybe this will be a kind of a wake-up call. And I hope we hope to have a guest on next month to discuss this whole natural gas fiasco that's taking place. But only 10% of our power is from so-called renewable resources right now, wind and energy. 10%. 90% of it is driven by natural gas. And the natural gas supply, if it gets scarce, has to be directed toward home heating. You know, and if that happens, that means the electrical grid is going to suffer, and we are going to see rolling blackouts.
And it's in huge trouble. Yes.
Yep.
And of course, you bring up a sore spot with me, because I had an oil delivery today.
There you go.
And it was close to $600.
Yeah. And how many? Yeah.
And I used to heat my house for the entire season for just about $500.
Yep.
So one delivery, $600, and in previous times, the entire year was about $500.
Yep. Last summer, I did a smart thing, and my fuel oil company offered a price lock situation. So I am locked in at less than $6 a gallon, and if the market is lower, I would get billed the lower price.
Wow.
Yeah. So people, people that don't have the price lock, people that depend on like a cash delivery type situation, they may get to a point where they're going to say to the guy, "Just give me 100 gallons."
Sure.
I mean, I can't afford to fill the tank. Or maybe 50 gallons. Just get me through, Yeah. And that's unfortunate. And I think I heard something today that kind of shocked me, because I kind of follow the financial news, business news a bit. Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, founder of Amazon, who sells consumer products cheap, actually was interviewed, and he said to customers, defer your purchases of big screen TVs and things that aren't necessary.
Wow.
And one of my grandsons worked at one of the big Amazon warehouses in Colorado. He got laid off just before Thanksgiving. Amazon, when they should be hiring people because so many people are ordering, today's Cyber Monday, they're laying people off. And Jim Dimon, the head of the largest bank in the world, JP Morgan, said the same thing. We are headed for a recession in 2023. And it's not only going to affect the United States, it's going to be worldwide. Now, that may be some real big factor in the 2024 election. I don't know. But people had really better be, I'm looking to see if there's a black cloud blowing over here. We're going to have to, but I mean, people really have to be prepared. We have some tough times coming, and people have to be prepared for it.
Yeah. And it's not going to get better, in my humble opinion, under this current administration, given the policies that they have implemented and the policies that they are proposing to implement. And I don't know where we're going to be in a year or two, but I think we're going to be in greater trouble than we are now.
I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that if you think back to when Barack Obama was president, one of the things he's actually said was the way we're going to drive people over to using electric vehicles to get away from fossil fuels and so forth was get the price of fossil fuels up. And that seems to be the case, but I don't understand this this whole move to say that by controlling the use of fossil fuels, we're going to influence the climate. We're certainly not helping the environment, because in order to make electric vehicles, you have to mine a lot of cobalt and a lot of lithium to make batteries.
Yes.
And right now, the World Health Organization, I believe it was, came out and said that the working conditions of the cobalt mines, and I believe in the Republic of the Congo, where most of this is located, are horrific. And they are employing child labor in these mines like they had in the coal mines at Wales. in, many years ago. And that doesn't seem to factor in. People who are driving around in electric vehicles are saying, like, well, they've taken a moral high approach that, oh, I'm helping to save the environment. Well, what are you doing on the other side?
Yeah.
I mean,
you're creating a horrible living circumstance for some people. Sure.
Yeah, and what's going to happen when everybody comes home from work and plugs in their electric vehicles for the next day, and we have a rolling blackout?
Yeah. And I mean, by nature, I am a conservationist. Mm-hmm. I make sure my house is energy efficient and, all that stuff that goes along with it. What bothers me is that we come up with a great idea. And one of the things that we don't do is understand what impact that great idea will have on other aspects of our living. It's a great idea. Let's do this. Let's do this. And then we find, as we find out in many instances, where we are supporting wind-generated electricity with revenue from the oil industry. So what improvement have we made?
It's called the law of unintended consequences.
Yes.
And when you want to talk about renewable energy, I'm involved. I did an audit, pro bono audit of a charitable organization, a nonprofit corporation, I should say, that built a solar generating farm on some land it owned a year ago. It's been in use for, actually in operation for like a year and a half. The first year of operation. Now, this is where it doesn't make sense, John. National Grid, now Rhode Island Energy, entered into an agreement with them to buy all of the electricity generated for 20 years at 21.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. Now, my last electric bill, and many people noticed that their electric bill went down this month. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the energy charge, it's like 14.5 cents to homeowners.
Which raises the question. How can I buy something from you at 21.5 cents and bill you 14.5 cents for it? It's a head scratcher.
Because it's a cross-subsidization of these so-called renewable energy sources.
Yes, that's exactly what I was implying when I was saying, we support this idea, we like it, it's good. I want to support it, but it's at someone else's expense.
Yep.
How is that fair? How is that right?
Anytime, any business, any proposal, and you can throw this idea of renovating the so-called Superman building downtown. As soon as they start saying we need these credits or a tax break to make it happen, it means that it's not a viable, economically viable project. And I'll give you an example, John. Late in my career, I was involved in banking and so forth, and I was involved in trying to work out small business administration guaranteed loans to small businesses. The predicate of getting a small business guarantee is that the lending institution says to the small business administration, without your guarantee, I would not make the loan to this entity.
Yes.
Think about that.
Yes.
So if this guy goes belly up, or this business goes belly up, or this venture fails, then the lender can go to the Small Business Administration and say, this is what they owe me.
Pay up.
Pay up. Yeah. And the Small Business Administration has the right or responsibility to go after this person. So once you admit that this is not viable without these kinds of credits or subsidies, it means that it can't stand on its own.
Yeah, it means that it's not viable.
Right. Right.
And that's what bothers me about this. I'm all in support of some of these great ideas. I want them now, but not at the expense of other people.
Yep.
No
other people are us,
yeah,
John.
and the other people are us, exactly. I want it to work for all of us, but not be a burden for other people.
Well, look at the student loan forgiveness, John, which is not constitutional every time they look at it, but nevertheless, it bought a lot of votes.
Yes.
And does it make sense for people to say, you have to unburden me from this loan that I signed and agreed to pay back, when you're asking people who maybe a kid goes to become an apprentice electrician or plumber or carpenter, and they have to go out and buy their tools and a van and equipment to make a living. They're not getting a subsidy, but they're going to be asked to subsidize a college student who may have taken a degree in sports communications or gender studies or something else, that they can't find a job, but they can't pay the loan back. Well, you went ahead and did it. You agreed to pay this thing back, but now you want the government to bail you out. But who's going to bail it out? The productive person who didn't get a loan and is making a living or trying to make a living?
That's where the money's coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dick, we are approaching, believe it or not, the end of our almost an hour program. So I want to be sure that you have talked about everything that you wanted to talk about. We didn't discuss too much the red wave that didn't turn out to be a red wave.
Yeah, that was a real miscalculation, and a lot of people who looked at it did not think that it was going to happen, simply because the Democrats didn't have to work on as many seats as the Republicans. There wasn't enough play in the Senate. Now, I think we get back to the argument about a voting season versus an election day in many locations. I mean, we know they're still counting ballots in Arizona, strangely enough. Mm. But, I mean, and you look at Georgia, which has, this stupid runoff system where you got to get 50% plus one vote in order to sit there. So you got two guys, the Reverend and the football star, are going to have a runoff. So we still don't know how many seats they're going to have in the Senate. But the fact is, Democrats are going to control it because the vice president would cast a tie-breaking ballot. But this whole situation is very strange, and I think one of the big things that is of concern I see is the situation on our southern border, which really only one network seems to be covering, and the administration just seems to ignore, and I think it's by design. If you know, Majority Leader Schumer has already come out and said we should give amnesty to all these people that are coming in. And most people in this country do not understand the difference between political asylum and being a political refugee.
Yeah, those are very different concepts.
A very different concept. And these people are being coached to come in and seek asylum.
Yep.
And one thing I have to comment on, John, as I look at those pictures of people coming and standing in line, waiting to be processed when they get into the United States, they've walked all the way from Venezuela, and none of them look dehydrated, malnourished. Their clothes look in pretty good shape, and they've walked all that way.
Maybe they have sponsors.
Do you think? And are the sponsors telling them to ask for asylum rather than
perhaps
be a refugee? Because if you're a refugee, you don't get in until you're vetted. So
the immigration system is problematic. And I don't believe that the typical American is anti-immigration.
No.
We're all from immigrants. You are, I am, everyone that's working on this program right now. We have ancestors that came to America from somewhere else. What needs to be changed is how we're going about it today. And it's a mess, Dick. And neither the Democrats or the Republicans can get together on this, because this is a powerful issue that they make hay with.
Absolutely. And it could have very serious implications on the future of this country.
Indeed.
When my grandparents came here, both sets of grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe, yet they came here with, number one, with sponsors.
That's right.
Who are responsible for them. Mm-hmm. And number two, there are plenty of semi-skilled jobs that they could come and work on and learn a semi-skilled trade and make a decent living. And that's why they came here.
Sure.
And they were expected to be assimilated into our culture. Now, I don't know about your background. My parents, because they were first-generation Americans, spoke the language of their parents.
Of course.
But they absolutely refused to teach me and my sister the language because they said, "You're Americans."
Well, that's interesting, Dick, because my ancestors are from Italy. And my first language was Italian. Mm-hmm. The summer before I was to enter school, I went to my grandmother, Nonna. Mm-hmm. She put her hand up and she said to me, "In inglese solo."
English only.
In English only. And I could not talk to her in Italian any longer. Mm-hmm. Why? Because my grandmother was a smart woman, and she understood that to be successful in school, I had to master the English language.
Yeah. Well, what are we doing today, John? We're printing everything in 2 languages.
Indeed.
And you know, it's going to be remarkable that Spanish is going to become the second language. We are going to be a dual language, just like they are in Canada, parts of Canada, Quebec primarily.
Well, I've advised all my grandchildren to take Spanish because, yes,
when they get out of school, they have to have it.
It's going to be imperative.
Yep. They'll be at a disadvantage if they don't.
Well, Dick, we are, believe it or not, out of time.
A whole hour went by, John?
Yes, it did. And Dick, I want to thank you very much because it's not often any longer that we get Dick August as a guest.
Wow.
And it's been fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. I hope our viewers enjoy it. And I say to them, thank you for watching State of the State. And please join us again next time for the next edition of State of the State.